Hello class, this is going to serve as your chapter 5.1 lecture. These are traits of the private enterprise, and this is kind of where we start really talking about marketing and we really get into it and we talk about kind of competition and how companies compete with each other. So, interesting thought, but what does it take for you to be self-motivated? Our objectives for today, we're going to explain some of the characteristics of a free enterprise, distinguish between price and non-price competition, and then we're going to touch on the theory of supply and demand, which we've already kind of done, but we'll touch on it again. So the heart of the matter is that countries and businesses work in a global marketplace, and many of them have market-oriented economic systems that feature traits of what we call a free enterprise. Some of those traits include various freedoms. The freedom to enter an industry or business and compete with other businesses, the freedom to own property and or equipment, the freedom to take on risk, and risk has both reward, right, and then it could have loss. And then this whole concept of the profit motive and being rich and living a good life. So here's our vocabulary, and as is usual, we'll go through it as we go along. So, traits of a free enterprise system, and I'm going to put all of these out here. But some of the biggest traits that can be rare in other countries is this freedom and right to own your own business and have what's called intellectual property. We'll go into more detail what intellectual property is in a minute. But you have the right and the freedom to own a business. Every single one of you in here could go to the courthouse and file paperwork that says, I am going to start my own business. It could be the initials of your name. You could call it a limited liability company, and you're on your way. Whether or not that business makes any money, I have no idea. So we also have the right, and a trait of a free enterprise system is that right to compete, where if you don't like the way something is being done or a way a business is functioning, well, you can go do it yourself and do it better. No one stops you from entering into a business. You have the right to take risk your money, time, and skills, and you have the right to earn a profit, and that profit is money left after expenses. We'll get into that a bit later. And then you have the ability to earn all of those various rewards that come with success. So I'll leave this up here for a couple more seconds, and we'll move on. The next slide does display a lot of the same information. So, your formal definition for private enterprise is a business ownership by ordinary people, not the government. So, and I guess the easiest comparison is Saudi Arabia owns most of the oil industry and most of the oil businesses with a company called Aramco, and it's owned by the Saudi family in particular. So basic elements of a private enterprise, exactly what we talked about in the last section. Freedom to own property, freedom to compete, freedom to take risks, and freedom to make profit. Hopefully you have those 4 freedoms down somewhere in your notes. Alright, patent, trademark, and copyright. So here are these 3 formal definitions. You've probably heard a little bit about these at some point, shape, or form, and at some time. A patent is a document granting an inventor sole rights to an item or an idea. So that is someone patenting various processes or various traits that some type of product has. A lot of our technology companies have tons of patents. And there are companies that literally thrive off licensing patents to other companies. Trademark is a word, name, or symbol, sound, brand name, brand mark, trade name, trade character, color, or a combination of these elements that identifies a good or service and cannot be used by anyone but the owner because it is registered with the federal government and has legal protection. So all of your brand names, all of your logos, all of those trade names or trade characters, right? Tony the Tiger, trade character. He is trademarked by Kellogg's. They own him. They own the idea, the concept of him, however you want to look at it, and if you were to make money off of that without talking to them, they could potentially sue you for one, for either for damages, two, they could actually sue you for the money that you have already made. And then a copyright is anything authored by an individual, such as writings, books, magazines, articles, music, and artwork. All of the music on Spotify that has all these independent rappers, that's all copyrighted by them for the most part. Now, there is a whole business and industry where you can license music from other people. And that's been going on that way forever. There are dead musicians whose music is being copyrighted to this day, and the estates that own that music are making money off of it. So similarities and differences, they're actually all pretty different. The one major similarity is that they all offer some form of protection, and that protection is critical to us kind of having a economy and a government that stays stable, right? We know that, hey, if you're this great inventor that comes up with this great idea and you file a patent for it, well, that is now protected over a period of time. And then if you trademark the brand or idea, then that's protected as well. And if there is some kind of content that you write, article, or some kind of information, that can also be copyrighted as well. We talked about Johnson & Johnson writing a book about how to use bandages in sanitary surgeries. That book was likely copyrighted, and much of their products probably had patents and trademarks involved in them as well. So here we go. This is price versus non-price competition. This is kind of one of your more basic principles of marketing, but companies compete in a private enterprise, and this is one of the ways that they do it. So some companies focus on price competition. They focus on the sale price of a product. They assume that all things being equal, consumers will buy the product at the lowest price. A good example of that might be just gasoline in general. We tend to look for who has the cheapest gasoline price, and that's where we go. And those gasoline stations tend to follow each other in price. They go up together, they go down together, so on and so forth. Non-price competition. When businesses choose to compete on factors of their product or service that are not related to price. I don't think any of us are like, oh, that gasoline is better than that gasoline. And we don't think of it that way. We just think, hey, I need gas, I have to get where I'm going, so I'm going to go get the cheapest gas. Companies that compete on price, though, compete on non-price factors, so features of the car might be car companies, right? Toyota is known for having vehicles that last 200,000 miles, and they charge a premium for that factor. And there are a bunch of companies that compete against each other on non-price factors. They compete on service factors, right? So I'm going to throw these up here, and we'll have a quick conversation about them all. This logo right here, this is the Ritz-Carlton. This may be cut off out of your video. But I'm going to pause this, and we'll go over each one in the class together. Alright, I hope that went pretty well, and had some good answers there, and we'll keep on moving. So this is another example of price and non-price competition, and they're giving you this example of buying a tennis racket, and then you go 30 miles away to buy a tennis racket at another store, even though there was a store closer, because the store farther away had a better price for you. And so that better price is a price decision, right? And we're talking about price competition. However, you go to a bicycle shop and you buy a bicycle at the local shop because they offer repairs. Well, that's a factor that has nothing to do with the actual price of the bicycle. So we're talking about non-price competition. So monopolies. Formal definition for monopoly, and we've talked about monopolies before, but control over a product or the means of producing it. And yes, Monopoly is a game, and the point of that is to have total control over your area, whatever color that is. You get a Monopoly when you have all three, or two for the two short ones. So, impacts of monopolies. Companies able to obtain complete control over the production and sale of a product, perhaps by lowering prices to drive the competition out of business. Kind of sounds like Walmart. Possible effects. Well, once the competition's gone, prices can be driven up. Reduced selection, poor quality, and control over who gets the product by raising price. One of the examples that I noticed right off the bat when I moved to Brownsburg, we had 3 internet choices at our new house: Spectrum, Bright House, or AT&T. Well, we went with Bright House because they offered the best price. So it was $50 a month for 60 up to 60 megabytes of download speed, and I can't remember what the upload speed was. But anyways, I liked the price. It was really good. Where I came from in Seattle was a lot more expensive, and well, this was really exciting. It was about a year into living there. Bright House was bought out by Spectrum, and Spectrum sent us this wonderful email from the CEO, and the CEO said, "Hey, we're buying because we can offer a better service and a better product, and we're not going to raise prices." Well, we had our pricing for about another year, and lo and behold, a year later, price had gone up to over double what we were paying. So my bill was over $100, and I had higher prices. I had reduced selection. Quality was about the same. But they were pushing, you could argue they were pushing certain people out of the market. If you couldn't afford a $100 internet bill, you'd have to go somewhere else. So we actually ended up switching over to AT&T, and our bill is it's not as expensive, but it's not as cheap as it was with Bright House. That competition was a major benefit for the consumer. Profit. Profit is the money earned from conducting business after all costs and expenses have been paid. And there is a basic equation that I'll show you in a second once you get this down, that kind of details profit. Profit comes from our income statement, and it is our revenue is the money that comes in. Expenses are what we pay to get that money, or get that revenue, I should say, and then we're left with profit, or what's also known as net income. But this is your income statement equation. This is one of the financial statements that we will touch on in class, but really go over in entrepreneurship and then in the accounting class. So if you haven't taken the accounting class yet and are thinking about it, or just enjoy business, I highly recommend it. It is not mathematically bound, and if you can do Algebra 1, you can easily master accounting. So don't be scared of it. It is actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the class. But revenue is money coming in. Expenses is what we're paying pretty much to earn that revenue, and we're left with profit. Real basic. Make sure you write this down. All right, supply and demand. Formal definitions are: supply is the amount of good producers are willing to make and sell, and demand is consumers' willingness and ability to buy the product. And so just keep that in mind. Supply is coming from producers, and demand is coming from consumers, right? Consumers decide what is sold, and producers decide how something is made. The law of demand is the economic principle that price and demand move in opposite directions. So, another trait of the free enterprise system, you're going to want to understand and write this down, is that we have a surplus when supply exceeds demand, and we have a shortage when demand exceeds supply. That is fairly common knowledge, but just in case, I highly recommend writing that down. And here is, I think, your classic supply-demand equilibrium quantity and price lines. So our line that goes left to right, that will always be our supply line. I'm sorry, both lines go left to right. I shouldn't say that. The line going up is going to be our supply line, and our demand line is always going to be coming down. This is our price, and this is our quantity. This is where we would have some form of equilibrium. And then up above, if we're in this area ever, right, we're above our supply, we're above our demand line on our supply line. We have a surplus, and over here, our demand line exceeds our supply, so we have a shortage. And that's actually it. We're going to work on a case study in a bit, and we'll get going on that tomorrow. But this is a good start to this chapter 5, and we'll be ready to have some fun. Thanks again.